All right, I'm recording. Thank you, Napoleon, for talking to me. It's been a week of listening to your music because I mostly only listen to music when I run. Seven days, I think I ran like 5 of them. I'm not gonna lie that like I ran all those days, but I got to listen to. Most importantly, I got to listen to your newest 19-minute track,
Okay.
"End of Their World," right? Part two.
Hmm.
I was really amazed by the extent to which you were able to like hold on to both the subject as well as the pacing and the language, all of them consistently for 19 minutes. Why don't you like start talking about that track, and then like we can slowly maybe like my next question will be about your origin story and all of that.
Yeah, it's actually a special track because it's not like any track that I've done in the past because it's actually not only mine. Not only is it long, I've never written a 19-minute song ever in my career, not even close. It's actually an idea from a French rapper producer named Akhenaton. And he's probably from the most iconic French rap group called I Am. That they had a 30-year long career. They brought hip hop to France because he used to come to New York a lot. He had a song called La Fin de leur Monde, which is the same beat and everything, and he asked me to adapt it into English. So it's more than a translation; it's an adapt. I had to adapt
Adaptation, right?
because there he said he wanted that message to be out there, but he also wanted me to bring my stuff in it, and he wanted it also from the American angle because he was talking it more from a French angle. So there's certain things about French politics that English people speaking people wouldn't really get unless they're really into that stuff. So it was like it's more like a hybrid, but at the same time I had to keep pace with what he was saying more or less too at the same time. So it was a cool project, and I'm glad I got to be able to do it because I'm also a fan of his. Like I grew up to his music, so I understand the essence and the soul of what he does, and I'm just so happy that he invited me to do that.
It did sound like a French kind of like beat. I have to say, like the beat was
Yeah,
like pretty mellow throughout,
yeah.
and I was very surprised by the fact that like the beat was kept mellow. But I guess like if you're gonna have it be a long track, it does have to pick up pace steadily. But like more on that later, I suppose. But like let's get to tell me a little bit about like you said that you grew up listening to Akhenaton. Tell me a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and who your influences were. What got you into this, man?
Well, I was born in Paris, France, and my parents are from the Comoros Islands, which is in Lower East Africa. An island that was originally historically colonized by Arabs, and afterwards it was colonized by French. And there was slavery there. There was a lot of things, and the island got their independence in 1975. My father was into politics when he was
Hmm.
young, and he actually was part of a socialist party over there, and he was protesting against the colonizers, and they kind of like they tried to kill him a few times,
Oh
and
my God.
to the point where his family was like, it's not safe for you to be here, and he actually went to France and to study, and that's how I ended up being born in France. My mother is from a different island called Mayotte, which is now France itself, because France gave up 3 islands and let him be independent. I said they let him because they kind of like they kind of messed it. They kind of cheated their way into keeping Mayotte one island because of military strategic things.
Hmm.
And then we came to America when I was like around 4 years old. And so I grew up in the Maryland, DC area. And that's when, it was a culture shock for the family and everything because, we're a pretty traditional, quote unquote, African Comorian family, and just learning the language, learning the culture and everything. And that's kind of how during that period is when hip hop was like everywhere. It was
Blown
bubbling.
up,
So
right?
it was part of my
What
youth,
year was this?
it was in the 80s, like late 80s. I got into hip hop when it was like, when it was like the Wu-Tang Clan and
Right.
people like that, Jay-Z's and everything like that. And at the time, it's funny because I watched it. I listened to it on the radio, but I used to watch it on TV. And every Wednesday on BT, there was they would call it the old school hip hop day. So it was cool because we used to watch like the old school hip hop too. So we got kind of that education of like how hip hop evolved through the eras. And that's kind of like what got me into the music. I was into hip hop before I even knew how to rap or even wanted to rap. I was just a big fan of it.
So when did you start rapping, and like what were the circumstances when you started doing it?
I think you know, I was probably around 15 years old. I was in my teens, you know, and it was I seen my friends start to do it. One summer they came back and a group of my friends from school had like a tape that they had recorded. And I thought it was amazing because as much as I was a fan and we were all fans of hip hop, I never thought about doing it myself. And automatically I'm like, I need to try this. And I would say it was a lot of influences because I was listening to all the quote unquote great rappers at the time, the Nas's, the Biggie, Jay-Z's, Raekwon, Wu-Tang. So I played the Only Built for Cuban Links tape from Raekwon a lot. And so I think that had a lot to do with some of my influences at first, flow-wise and everything like that. But to be honest, there was a lot. I was a big fan of Busta Rhymes. I was a big fan of a lot of different people. I think to be true, like people like to name one person because my voice might sound like something, but the influence was a hybrid of many artists.
Maybe it's the fact that I recently got into listening to MF Doom, but like
Okay.
I started hearing a lot of MF Doom in the kind of way that you were doing stuff. So I wondered if you had a chance of like chance to listen to MF Doom growing up, and like what you thought.
You know what? That's I would say accidental. No, because I'm a fan of MF Doom now. Like I'm a big fan, but I can't. I was late to the party when it came to him, and I knew of him. I might have heard a song here and there, but it's only I think around 2016 that I really started listening to him. So it wasn't I don't think he influenced like the constitution of who I am as an artist, but you kind of see like, oh, he does things like this too. And it's very interesting, very poetic, very unorthodox sometimes, just abstract. You know, it reminds me a little bit of what Ghostface was doing too, because Ghostface would just throw like colorful visuals into his rhymes, and
Right.
MF Doom really did that. But I love MF Doom, man. He's you know, rest in peace to him. He was one of the best. I liked him.
The way that I saw MF Doom was that he wasn't particularly like really going for anything. Like there wasn't like really any like bottom line message, but he was kind of delivering something that was like a collage of thoughts that like really didn't have any like statement per se. But like on the other hand, you kind of have a statement, which makes it like kind of even more potent because like, and that's kind of interesting that you say that you encountered MF Doom in 2016 because like I think it was in Steel this mixtape that I started hearing a little bit of stuff like that because like in that, or I don't know if it's that or coup d'etat, you start like throwing in these speeches and like these, I don't know if they're panthers. I'd like for you to talk about that. Some kind of like, I don't know who exactly it is, but there's like a lot of radical speeches and like kind of political statements being made. So why don't you talk a little bit about that and like how those audio collages like kind of came to be?
Well, it's very interesting because it's very, very astute that you noticed that, because the reason why I started kind of more listening more to MF Doom, I knew who he was the whole time. It was because Still This Mixtape was actually a collaboration project with me and a friend of mine. Shout out to Brian Winston. He's just a friend of mine who's a hip hop head who lived in New York, and we always used to talk about rap. And it was a time where I moved to New York in 2012. I put out my first album, Awakening. And I went through this period where I started doing a lot of shows and a lot of features. And I realized I went through 3 years without releasing anything. And me and him got closer, and he was like, he's one of those guys that loves listening to beats and loves listening to obscure hip hop. So he was like, yo, why don't you do a mixtape? And he was like, I'll give you the beats and you'll just do what you do. You know, he's not a music guy, but he has a good ear. So he was giving me a lot of Dilla beats, MF Doom beats. And while we was crafting songs, like we would both come up with ideas, and we're like, oh, let's take this radical Martin Luther King speech, let's take this Mamiya speech, let's put it in there and make it all cinematic, which kind of ties back to Only Built for Cuban Links, which was very cinematic, and where they sampled like a lot of mafia movies and things like that. But we wanted to make it more radical, so to speak, in its tone. So that's kind of what the link, and him giving me those beats made me listen to the source material, because that's how I got into Doom. I was listening, I was like, oh, this is dope. Like I was sleeping on this. And so it was kind of his influence too, which brought that project together.
Yeah, it's very interesting how like friends and like just collaborations and getting to meet interesting people can like totally bring whole new genres into like your work. You talk about like making the album Awakening. Awakening is pretty cool, and I thought that like even in the iconography and all of that, you seem to be like very clearly going for a very Tupac kind of vibe in that album. So tell me a little bit about how you made that album and like how you landed the record label. Like it got released through a label, I presume, right?
Well, no, actually,
So
that was independent. That was my first album, and it was half made when I was living in Maryland at the time. That's when I started it. So I started getting tracks from different producers and recording, and I had that life change, which brought me to New York. Which one day I just made a decision. I was like, nothing is happening for me in this area. I'm not really getting any traction for what I'm doing. I should be in New York. Somebody actually suggested it to me, but in a friendly way, and it just stuck in my head. Like maybe I should go. You know, I have nothing tying me to Maryland, and I had opportunities to go to New York. So I moved to Brooklyn and kept going. And you know, I was able to get Raekwon. You know, I talked about Only Built for Cuban Links. I got him on the album. I got rest in peace Sean Price on the album that I had met when I was in New York. And to be honest, I wasn't going for any type of particular vibe when it came to Tupac. I didn't do it consciously, at least. To be honest with you, I added skits and stuff because I was going more like, I wanted something to sound more like Cuban Links, Only Built for Cuban Links, where there was interludes where me and my friends spoke in between, and I was talking about how I got to New York and things like that, and my state of mind. To be honest with you, I just did my best. I didn't know what I was doing. Like I was just creating music, trying to and try to piece things together as somebody who was producing himself, so to speak. Even though you get beats and everything like that, it's not like I had a producer or an executive producer.
who was making your beats at that time?
Well, there was different producers. I was getting beats from whoever I could get beats from. So there was my man Unknown, who now works a lot with Odyssey. There was my man Dust from New Jersey that I met at a festival. There was my boy B Baz that he met me at a showcase. So it was a patchwork thing where I would get a beat from there. Had this French producer called Also Proby who has like gold records in France that I've met when I was younger. So it was like a collage of things, and I put it together, and it was my statement to be like, I'm an artist. My name is Napoleon da Legend. This is who I am. I wanted a catalog, whatever I did, to be able to say like, I exist, you know, because doing shows or going into rap ciphers and people telling you know how to rap, that you good, that you got skills, it's only limited. It's like you can only get so much people tapping your back like, yo, you're dope, you're nice. I needed to establish myself, and that's why I called it Awakening. It was just my introduction.
What's the rationale behind the persona? Like, how do you define the persona? Do you define it? Like, why the legend? And like, kind of even in Awakening, I have to say, your lyrics kind of had a much more free flowing. Just you were being much more pulpy and not very form oriented. And you were letting yourself go, and you kind of like played with the music. And I really like your selection of beats. That's why I wanted to ask you, because you kind of have an ear for like a lot of instrumental oriented music. Like you want real sound. I don't know if that's like that sounds like an offensive term, you know, like I don't want to any electronic music, but at the same time, I think there's something about like seeking out that sound and like speaking on top of that makes it more real, I feel like. What do you think?
I think you mean like texture wise. I like things that you know, sampled sounds
Right.
that have a lot of soul. I like the rapper
Like a
with,
whole bunch of blues licks in there. Like
right,
I felt
right.
like there was like a BB King lick. I don't know if that was Awakening or Legendary. I forget which one it was. Maybe it was Timeless. What was Timeless in?
Wow. I think Timeless was in the Legendary mixtape. And
Right.
Legendary was
Okay.
something different. Legendary was a whole
Hmm.
bunch of verses that I had, because I told you during those 3 years I didn't release anything, but I did so
Hmm.
many features. And I asked, I'm like, I need a lot of these features people didn't hear, you know, they just heard my album, but I might have did a feature with this artist and people, I know people didn't hear. And I'm like, I like these verses. I want to use them in some way. And so I asked a DJ Juke, who's a French DJ for another legendary French rap group, just so happens, called Assassin. And he put it together, he mixed it together. And he passed away also, I think a year or two ago. So rest in peace to DJ Duke. And that's the story behind that. But I have no idea where some of these beats came from, man. They're from all over the
Hmm.
place.
Tell me a little bit about the Napoleon the Legend persona. Like, sorry,
Yeah.
we were talking about that, and I kind of segued into this.
One of my first loves was basketball. And when I was younger, I used to have big hoop dreams. So it was hip hop and basketball was my life. You know, that's all I cared about. And I was short, you know, and you play basketball, you're around giants. But I was very skillful. Like I got to, you know, I was averaging like 27 points in varsity and junior and senior. I was playing AAU for a school in Washington, D.C. called Dunbar. I would play in the weekends at an invitational place where Allen Iverson used to play, a lot of these people. So I played with all of these people when I was younger. And they gave me a nickname. They used to call me Napoleon around where I used to play around the neighborhood because I was short. And I was like, I didn't play like I was short. I played like I was 7 feet tall. Like I would go inside, I would jump high, stuff like that, and I would talk a lot. So it was a nickname that people gave me. So naturally, when I started to rap, I kept Napoleon. And the name Legend came one day, like I just said a rhyme in the intro, and I said Napoleon the Legend. And I just liked the way it just sounded. And I'm like, you know what? There's a lot of things, because Napoleon, okay, it
You're
goes
from
with the,
France.
yeah, the French thing from Corsica. He took over France. He tried to take over the world. So me, Comores Island, France, and I'm trying to be heard and trying to be known. And people, with a lot of people who are outside of hip hop don't get about hip hop is the sports factor and the competitive factor with hip hop, which is a lot like basketball. It's like, it's more than just poetry. It's also an exercise in like, it's like you're sparring sometimes in a way,
Mm-hmm.
and using the verbs and expressing yourself in a certain way. You want to stand out. You want to be the guy that people, when they hear your verse, they're like, oh, look at him. Look what he said. Look how he said it. And the legend was me saying that I'm writing my own personal legend. And I'm also forecasting myself in the future. And it's like, as bold as it seemed and as ridiculous as it seemed at that point, it was like me constantly aiming to be remembered and to be like, I need to make this happen. So there's a lot of ambition and, you know, trying, being heard that comes with the name, you know. And I know the history of Napoleon, and it's not positive. These are like, you know, narcissistic egomaniacs and everything like that. But from a hip hop standpoint, it's more like, yeah, you know, I'm a samurai. You know, samurais back in the Japanese, they used to kill people to get the name, and
Right.
we kill beats to get a
Right.
name.
Yeah. I mean, like it makes sense even from an intellectual standpoint, because I mean, this is probably like going too deep into it, but like Napoleon was like rationalized a little bit by, like, Hegel had this big thing about Napoleon being you know, justifiable because he wanted to dominate the world, but in his personal project, he was able to do a whole lot of good. So I guess like even in that way, you are able to, I think the name stands. I looked it up. It's like a kind of very silly thing, I think, called struggle rap. It's just like supposed to be something lame.
Mhm.
But I thought that like you were talking about the struggle as opposed to the hustle. And I think that like that makes it, and it's not like an artist struggle, but a human struggle, and like a very a human in society, a human in the economy. And I feel like usually rap tends to be very like kind of blinkered when it comes to that type of stuff, because they just want to focus on, okay, I want to take care of myself and max my people, my crew. And I appreciate that. There's a lot of honor in it, you know, and of course, like we're all like we're coming from oppressed backgrounds, and like it's in a way that's why, like, you know, even a lot of fans are able to justify it, etc. So like, but on the other hand, your rap, can you talk a little bit about what all your struggles are, and why you want to talk about them?
You know, it's funny because, like you said, struggle rap is seen as pejorative because rap is the music of winners. You know what I'm saying? The perceived winners, like Jay-Z being the epitome of that. You know, the perfect super entrepreneur. Rap is very Trumpish, you know, in a way. Like, and Trump before he even became president. That's why a lot of rappers used to, you know, call themselves Black Trump and this and that, because it was success. It was, you know, put your name everywhere and stuff like that. But I used to call what I do reality rap. That's why I used to call it, because I do talk about the hustle, because there's a lot of hustle in what you know, trying to make things happen and producing yourself and moving to cities and doing this and that. But I got to a point where I'm like, look, I'm not signed to a label. I don't have to justify a bottom line like a lot of these artists that are signed that you guys hear, that you got, they had, when they record something, there's so much money invested in them that if they fail, they're out the game. So, and so a very small percentage of them actually win, even though they rap like they're all winning. It's a small percentage of artists make it even within that industry, right? I'm like, I'm not looking for that, and I don't need that. I don't need to have the top 40 hit. If I have it, great. You know, I'm not against it. That's not the point. My point is I realized that by recording I'm taking you on a journey. So I'm taking people, I'm like, this is my ride. This is my life. I'm talking about my life as honestly as I can. So the song I put out this year, The Hole in My Heart, right? I talk about how I worked at CVS. I was making $7.25, you know, so I talk about the minimum wage. And so I talk about different things and the ups and downs and times where I didn't think I was going to do anything with my music, you know, and I took the chance. I went to New York and I was able to change my life, taking that chance. If I had stayed over in DC, Maryland, I don't think I would be doing all this. I don't think me and you would be talking like this. And so I wanted to give people something they could truly relate to, like, hopefully not just aspirational rap. I do some of that too. Like, I project myself a lot in my music, saying that, you know, in the future, I'm going to be my name projects itself. I'm called Napoleon the Legend. You know what I'm saying? Right. However, I want to take you through the journey because this music helped me a lot. You know, like, I was listening to these albums and getting a lot of motivation. When I felt alone, I felt like somebody was there with me through this music.
Right.
And it's only right that the way I rap, I know people go through hard times because I've been alone a lot. Look, when I was 16 years old, I graduated from high school pretty early, right? I was like 16. My parents had split. They left the country. My father went to the Ivory Coast and my mother went to Paris, right? And so I spent a lot of time alone. Like, I spent a lot of time by myself. Like, I had friends and stuff. I wasn't like all alone, and I had people that if I needed help, like my friends' family, they liked me. Like, it's not like I was like I Am Legend with Will Smith with nobody left on earth, but there was a lot of times where I just had myself and the music.
Right.
I think it affects the way I rap because my rap is more personal than the average person because I'm by myself doing this a lot. Like when I have all these producers making me beats, they're not there really producing me. I'm producing me. They're giving me the beats, but I'm handling the mixes. I'm
You're
doing
the artist,
arrangements.
yeah.
I'm doing everything. So I think that gives the extra personal touch somehow with my music, where people is like, yo, this is somebody in this room that's just pouring out his soul right there.
Right.
And that's where the struggle comes from, where it's like, look, it was hard. There was times in my life where I didn't think I was gonna stop. because we're so much into the success story. Like this person went to a bar and sang and then got discovered, and the next day they're a superstar. And a lot of times you don't really hear the story where I don't know. I mean, I know Jay-Z, for example, I'm using that as an example, struggled at some point. And I've heard too, and I've had stories from people telling me like how he was going around labels for years. Nobody wanted to sign him. They said he was too old. He was this and that. I heard so many things, right? And I'm not at all denigrating Jay-Z. I'm a fan of Jay-Z, but like you don't hear that in his raps too much.
Right.
That's my point. And me, I wanted to give the whole picture. That's all.
Hey, thanks for sharing all of this stuff, man. That's like very deep and moving. And in fact, like I also kind of in a way don't have to thank you also, because you feel totally comfortable sharing that even in your work. You're putting yourself out there in your work, and I really appreciate that. I think that's exactly. I mean, in a way, I feel like that's the role of the artist. You are basically offering yourself to the listener, and like basically most artists, like in the present day, tend to think that like they're offering products, but like in the old school, old fashioned way, like we basically gave ourselves, like our lives, our entire like being to the person who's watching us, because that's kind of the performance. And you definitely put you hang yourself out to dry, man, like definitely. And I think that like you can hear that in the music, you can hear that in the words. In the words, I definitely hear a person who's trying to speak to somebody who seems to be like either a person like a peer, or a person who's like a little younger or something like that, or a past self. I kind of felt like it was like you talking to yourself, or like a person that you used to be or something like that. Tell me a little bit about who you're talking to, and like how rap, because of how intimate it is, it has the ability to be an educational tool, a political tool, a radicalizing tool.
Uh, it depends, the part of it is very much subconscious. Like I'm at a point where, I hear the music and I just let it go, So who am I talking to? It's an interesting question. It's not something that I consciously think about. If I think about it, I'm talking to my peers. I'm talking to that person that was like myself, that was by him or herself at some point, or kind of lost and trying to find a way, and tell them that, like, look, without trying to sound too self-helpish, whatever, like, yo, just hold on. Like, if you really stay focused, it really helps and you can really build something out of yourself. And I speak to myself also, which is interesting. I never thought about speaking to my younger self. I speak to myself also as a reminder. It's like sometimes I say things that are like wisdom for me that I could use, and I immortalize it. So maybe it's catalog that, yo, remember, like this is a jewel you should remember, because I forget, I forget a lot of the stuff I write. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like there's a part of it that's etching it in history, where I just wanted to be told, and that I've said that.
Tell me about Coup d'etat, and how you wrote that album, how that album came to be. It's an interesting title. There are so many things that come to mind, and of course, it's a French word. As Napoleon da Legend talking about a coup d'etat, it's again like it's got its own imagery, iconography, etc. So tell me how you made it, and like inspiration behind that album concept, the politics of it, how you got, what all you read, what all you might have been listening to at that time.
Coup d'etat is an interesting word for me, because it's a word that I've been hearing all my life. And I'll tell you why. Because I'm from the Comoros Islands. Comoros Islands, look it up on Wikipedia. I need to look at the history. Is the country with the most coup d'etats in the world. So a lot of people don't know that. So there was so many coup d'etats where mercenaries would come. They've killed a few presidents. Some Comorians themselves later on also did coup d'etats to take over the power. So when I was growing up, I was hearing coup d'etat all the time, right? So it goes with Napoleon, but it also goes where I'm from. And so that word's always been around. It's always been like, taking something by force. You know what I'm saying? When something's not given it to you, and it's not only a good thing, it's also a bad thing. You know what I'm saying? Because
Mm-hmm.
the country suffered a lot from these coups d'etats, these multiple coups d'etats. It's unstable to this day, kind of. You know, it's doing a little bit better, but it's still very unstable, like a lot of colonized nations in Africa, because the imperial powers don't want to let go. They rather
Right.
them be unstable because they could control who is at the head of the countries for their policies and the trades and everything like that.
Right.
And that album, I met online a producer named Giallo Point. And Giallo Point is a producer from the UK who's also a DJ. So he does scratches and everything. Like he's almost like a champion, or he competed at a very high level with that. And
Mm.
I was just so astonished because he worked with so many artists, and I was known for being very prolific, and I saw he was very prolific. So us getting together, we just started recording a whole bunch of songs, and he had this style of beats that was very dark and very minimalist almost. Once you have beats like that, there's more emphasis on the words. So it just brought a different type of poetry, I think, from me, dealing with these beats, and also just my evolution. You know what I'm saying? At that point, it's just like you just feel like my voice. I'm more comfortable with myself. I'm more comfortable with the things that I'm saying. It was mostly all that coming together at once for these projects. And what we did is we recorded a bunch of songs. And that's why there's a Coup d'etat 1, there's a Coup d'etat 2. And then later on last year, we put out another one called Street Universe. And those songs were made in a span of time. And those projects came out later.
There's just like so much music that you made in 8 years, I think, right? Like it's been like 2013 was when it said like your
Yeah,
first
yeah,
album was out.
yeah, yeah.
And it's been 8 years. And I think that like you had 12 or like 15 records or something like that on Spotify itself that I saw. And that's like a pretty phenomenal level of, I'm probably undercounting, but that's like a
No,
pretty phenomenal level
I
of.
have a lot more than that, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I was saying. That's like a pretty phenomenal level of like output. Describe your like day to day and like how often you wind up writing a song, recording a track, like what ends up becoming, a track. Like, do you blend three or four things together? Give examples, maybe if something comes to mind.
It's very intuitive for me. It's a lot like I make mostly, unless I have life things that to keep me away from it. But I mostly make music every day.
Mm,
So I'm gonna create something. And a lot of these projects sometimes it's just let's say with Giallo Point, we say we're gonna work. So he'll send me a whole bunch of music and I
mm-hmm,
get to choose. I'll just take a folder, listen to what hits me that day, and I just
mm-hmm,
start to write, right? But I don't only work with one person. So I have like a Akhenaton, like last year during COVID, he asked me to do a project with, send me a whole bunch of beats. I select and I just go through it every day without a certain plan, but knowing I'm gonna do something.
mm,
And I just play the music, and I've come to be a pretty fast writer. Like so I've learned to put a little bit less thought in what I did, especially when I create and record. I just want it to be raw. I want it to be spontaneous. And like I said, unlike a lot of these artists that we know who are with labels, I don't know how they create exactly, but I know from speaking to people and everything, there's more people around you. You got people picking your beats, and then you
right.
might be in a room with people critiquing, saying this, you might want to talk about this. I don't have all that.
Mm.
I don't really care. So I just record, and then I assess what I have and what feels good and what don't. If I don't like it, it's just gonna go in the trash. It's just gonna go somewhere. But I don't piece things together, and I don't premeditate anymore. And even the songs where you might think like, I had to have sat down and really thought hard about this story, about this, about that. No, it's usually it just comes to me now, like I listen to the music and I just let it and it goes the same way if I do have a suggestion. Let's say I
Mm.
have a producer tell me like, yo, you should talk about this. Or I have myself an idea that last night I was watching this documentary on the environment, and I'm like, I want to speak about this. And usually they just seep into what I'm doing anyways. So
Right.
it's like, I feel like I'm writing a long song, like
Hmm.
throughout this whole time. And it just keeps going. And the different beats bring out a different part of my psyche where it's like, okay, this is gonna go here. And if it's like this, these emotions are gonna go here. But I let the emotion really drive. And I I think that's like kind of what I get from like somebody like Tupac, where it was, he was very poetic. He wasn't very it was very basic, you know, very easy
Hmm.
to understand and everything like that. But the emotion, I think, is what got people, like the soul that
Right.
he would put through everything. So I like that about him. When he's like, he was so productive, he would come to the studio and do 2, 3 songs a day, whatever, like that. I kind of have that in my own way.
Right. That's very revealing because I think what you're describing as minimalist and poetic and like the emotions is very technically, and you're not like doing it as like a technical skill, but like just you being yourself raw. But like you somehow have the ability to like hit the beat in a very like smooth way, which is not like you're not trying to hit the beat. You're like just speaking. It seems like, and it's like almost like you're just like sliding on the beat, and I feel like that's the kind of effect that I also associated with MF Doom, for example. And that's why like I kind of had the comparison. As an independent artist, tell me a little bit about like how you take your music to the marketplace. And like Spotify says that like 25,000 people listen to your music every month. That's a decent amount. And like and I'm happy for you, and like I'm pretty sure you're grateful for that. And tell me a little bit about how that came to be, and like what all you know that process involves. Like, what does the marketing of your work involve?
It's funny, we got to talk to different artists, and everybody has their own ways. There's people that are like better businessmen probably than me, and better
Mm,
entrepreneurs, and they have techniques. You need to release this like this, so everybody download it from Bandcamp, and then you put it on Spotify where it's free. But at first you need to get people. And I remember, because I had this conversation last week with somebody, and I'm like, I don't care about that. When I put the music out, I want it to be out there. So if you click on it on YouTube just to listen to it on your spare time, it's a win for me. I'm very happy. I don't care. And I told God, for me, it's like, if you like what I do, and then you have it in your heart where you feel like, man, I need to support this some way, somehow. That person might get a CD. That person might get a vinyl. That person, when shows come, might show up in my shows. It's like a bird, like that expression when it's like the bird doesn't know which tree they're gonna land on when they take flight. It's the same thing.
mm,
I do the music, I give it to you, and I let life open the doors it's gonna open for me. So I just do it really basically. Once I finish with everything and I'm happy with the album, with the artwork, I go through a distributor, which we all have to use to get on Spotify's, on the iTunes and everything. I put it through my distributor, and I put it out on everything,
mm,
and I let it do what it do. It's very simple, and there's no middlemen. So I hear a lot of people complaining about streaming, and I understand it because the low pay. But at the same time, with me, I'm not dividing it with 1,000 people too. So it does make sense keeping me alive, where
mm,
it's like I'm not really complaining, you know what I mean? Because
mm.
like, 25,000 monthly listeners is not bad, you know what I mean?
That's right.
And
Yeah.
look, I'm not Rockefeller, but I'm able to put food on my table. I'm able to pay rent. I'm able to do what I need to do through this and keep making it, which is the goal. Which is, look, music has taken me so many places, like,
Mm,
traveled, meeting interesting people and this and that, where if I was sitting at a cubicle somewhere where it never happened, or if I was working at CVS like I used to, or lifting boxes, or working at a cafe like I used to, or doing all types of wild things, I would have never happened without the music. So it's my philosophy is just, once I put it together, if I want to shoot a video or something, I have an opportunity. If I have an idea, I'll make it happen. But I just want to give. I want to give. I don't have that restriction. Like I said at the beginning of the interview, I don't have a bottom line or anybody I need to answer to. So it's easier for me to just share it. And it's like, this album right there is how I felt during this period of my life. This album is how I felt during this. And that's why my albums, they all sound kind of different. And I don't really have a cohesive sound throughout. My
right.
voice and my flow, my ideas might have themes, But sonically, it depends on who I'm working with as a producer, if I'm producing it myself, and what themes I choose for myself.
Yeah, and I think that like what you're describing, having different phases in your life as a rapper, I think like you've been around for almost like a decade now, and you've already like demonstrated, I think like three different, at least I can see different shades of like colors of music, and what is interesting is that like I don't know if there's a lot of rappers or groups of whom you can say that, because like that's usually like, you know, longevity, for example, like because a lot of, you know, people come and go and have their little moments in the sun, and then like all of their other stuff is kind of like, you know, going to be very average, but you're like very steadily hitting the same level. And what's really interesting is that like you're doing different things and hitting that level. So it's kind of really, I think you're setting different goals for yourself and you're achieving them, and it's really heartening to hear all of that, because like the music speaks for itself, like it's an achievement. I asked this question of almost like every artist that I speak with, interview or not. All of your tracks, I think like I said, timeless. I made a mental note of a bunch of them. I'm actually, along with this interview, I'll probably make a playlist of all of the tracks that I liked for sure, and I'll like share it. So I think that like there's a whole bunch of tracks of yours that could be like easily, I could hear it on the radio. Like you even like have some pretty, you know, racy, like, you know, sexual,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
steamy,
yeah.
you know, it's like
Raunchy.
raunchy. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. You have that type of stuff also. And I just don't know how like an independent artist can get a number one hit at this point. Like how the fuck do you do that? Like, you know, because like you got everything, I think. And like I know a lot of artists who got everything, and this is not to like belittle you, but to say how many artists there are that, you know, I think can have number one hits, yet like, you know, nothing I think seems to happen in that department. So how do you think an artist like yourself can get a number one hit?
I'd be lying if I told you I knew for a fact. I have my ideas. I mean,
Do
I'm
you
not
know
looking.
stories of people?
I'm not looking for it in my current. That's not an objective. It's probably in a bucket list. I would love to have one. You know what I'm saying? I just understand the reality of the game and the way it is. It's kind of like, how does somebody become president? How does it's the same thing, because a lot of people need to be benefiting from what you do for these certain medias to promote you at that level, meaning that, for, simply put, you need a lot of money. You need some budgets, because you to make your song likely to be number one. All these radio stations need to have them through the program director, and they have to be compelled to play it. And people don't like to talk about it, but what usually compels people to play something in those business? It's a business. So it's an expensive endeavor. You got people that do that. They market music to radio, they market music to TV and everything. And I definitely don't have a budget. I put out my music myself, kind of like that, with basically no budget. So to get a hit, I think the closest way immediately for me to get a hit is for one day. For example, I'm doing a lot of things in France. Like, let's say Akhenaton, he's a very known person, right? Who's had hits in the past. But in the past, he'll say it himself. École du Micro d'Argent is the best-selling French rap album. And he's like, and he's very honest. A lot of artists are not honest like that. In interviews, he asked, like, how did it get there? He's like, I was in the time in the late 90s where French radio was bombarding hip hop. So the big radio station that was broadcasting through France was playing their whole album. They were on TV in rotation. They don't have that type of access anymore. You understand what I'm saying? But what could be possible is that somebody invites me, I'm from Comoros, right? And one of the most popular French rappers is from Comoros. His name is Soprano. Let's say, hypothetically speaking, I meet him and he's like, yo, Napoleon, I want you to get on a song with me. I could be in a hit in proxy of somebody else's song, because they're that big.
Right.
That could definitely happen, you know, very
Right.
realistically. And then once you get a hit, you got a different audience, then you yourself can make a song that could potentially reach that audience.
Right.
But it's not really it's not it's also very rigged because there's a playlist game that they play now where streams are count as album sales, and there's playlists that have like millions of followers that if they put you in the top 10 of those playlists, your song has the chance of being a hit because all these people are going to play it all the time. But you can't just get in these playlists. You know what I mean? There's a curator, it's on Spotify, it's this and that. Same thing with YouTube, same thing with all that. So it's very, once you talking about a hit, it's a lot more marketing than it is artistic.
Right.
And even though there is formulas to make hits and there's ways you make, you know, you make certain emotions, you hit certain chords and things like that, that you could replicate and you can feel that emotion. You can have just a great song. It can happen. I mean, but I doubt that. I think the game is too controlled right now for you to just come out there and just because you have a song, like a million people are going to share it for it to become a hit. You need some sort of exposure where all these people have you in mind. And,
Right.
or have seen you, or, you know, if LeBron James or Kevin Durant goes to the game and the reporter tells him, what are you playing before you go to the game? And he'll say, I'm playing Napoleon's song, Michigan Star. Yeah, you see what I'm saying? There's a lot of things like that. But I mean, and then again, with a cynical mind, sometimes you could think this, are people paying them to say that too? You know what I mean? Is that something? Because that's an easy way to promote something. And he's like, yo, you just pay his agent, he'll say your name. So it's something that I think for me to think about, it's just, it won't be, I'd rather it just happen organically as I make music and I get connections. And sometimes, let's say this person wants to work with me, that person wants to work with me, or this record label wants to work with me and somehow, and then I happen to get my hit. You know what I mean? It comes in the right time with the right sequence. And I like what you said. And it's funny because that artist called Soprano, who's like one of the most popular artists in French rap, who's Comorian, he said, I'd rather sell 500,000 copies of music throughout my career than sell 2 million copies in 2 weeks. He said that in an old interview. I always, and it's kind of like what I think I'm doing in my own right, because I'm just slowly rising organically with the people who like what I do and who follow, who are getting on board and getting into my journey. So, and like you said, most careers of people is like a flame at one point, and then it's almost extinguished. And you know why? Because more than just the artist, I'm also a producer. I produce myself. I put myself out there. A lot of artists, they have all the talent. They get noticed by somebody who's very a big marketing mind or has connections in the business, and they put money in them. They package him, they produce him, they put him in those star system matrices, and they get big. But then when it fizzles out and somebody else get big and they don't get talked about, how are they going to do it again? That's why you have a lot of legendary rappers that are talented. They're some of the best rappers, but they can't seem to get it together anymore.
Right.
Why? Because they were probably 19 years old. Somebody told them, come to the studio. They were getting high. They were doing what they loved. And the label got behind it. And when somebody else, and when their time was over, they didn't know there was 30 people working their project. They didn't know somebody was mixing, somebody was mastering. I had to send it here. There was promo teams working LA, Atlanta, this, that. It's an operation. It's not like what I'm doing is like organic for real. It's just like word of mouth. It's me. It's people who follow me, sharing what I do, email blast, simple things. So it's a slower burn, but it's burning.
Yo, it's like I can't even tell you the serendipity behind this, because like I wrote a poem recently. You'll even see I got tagged on an Instagram post. You'll probably see in my story. But like I wrote a poem called Slow Burn. I'm doing that with a band called Wild Americans. It's like the first thing that I'm doing as a sort of, it's not a rap, it's just like spoken word. But I'm inspired by Gil Scott-Heron from the beginning. Like I've always wanted to write poetry because of him, and I did the MFA program because he did the MFA program. Especially as you point out with these Spotify playlists and all of that, like and all of these gatekeeping still like kind of is very much alive, it seems like. So then like clearly that's why like there isn't a movement rap song. There isn't like a rap song that is like kind of I mean, like with Black Lives Matter being such a prominent movement in the United States, and like even this week, this has been a fucking hell of a last week.
Right.
Amid all of this, like there isn't like a rap song that actually became like a movement, cohesive movement rap song. And I think the closest that I can think of was like probably This Is America, which was not exactly like a movement rap, but it was probably more like a critique, satire, and it just like left it at that. Do you see like a potential for something that's not just like kind of candy, like that's not just like establishment doing it for the sake of clicks and selling, that you talk about in your rap as well, like in what is it called, in One Coin Two Sides? I thought that was pretty stellar. And in that song, like you kind of had this really cool line, which was Langston Hughes more than Terry Crews. And it's a heavy line because like Langston Hughes was a communist organizer and Terry Crews is a black entrepreneur, right? Like and that's kind of like, I think I would like for you to speak to the dichotomy between the two and how you are more of the former and not Terry Crews.
Well, what I always wanted to do with raps, it's like a lot of, when I do speak about things that are a little bit political, I want to make it also understandable and palatable for somebody who doesn't know, and might be curious to look people up. It's like, who's Langston Hughes? People know who Terry Crews is for the most part because he's a star. If you watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine, you watch some movies, you probably seen him. And Terry Crews, he tweeted "All Lives Matter" before and things like that. So, and I don't hate him. I think he actually comes across like a very nice guy. You know what I'm saying? But he's as safe as it gets. Whereas, like you said, somebody like Langston Hughes is like a revolutionary writer to me, and it's just to show where somebody like a certain superstar like Terry Crews gets all these looks, and it's probably backed by the biggest talent agencies and everything's like that, but he has to be as non-edgy as you could get, and even go, and it's ironic because of the way he looks too. He looks like such a warrior, gladiator, super alpha male, but he's actually a very nice guy, very non-controversial guy. And I think I put a lot of these things, like I said, I'm Cornell more than Kanye West, Cornell West, Kanye West. And it's these things where I want people to think like, and a lot of people that listen to hip hop, some people might not even know Cornell West, which for us, it sounds ridiculous, but if they're in their entertainment bubble and they're listening to certain interviews, they know more of the gangsters than they know the people they should know, or they should listen to, at least for insight. And that's really what I try to do with this song, is just to see like there's two things going on, one coin, two sides, and we need to be aware of it all. And as long as I don't have to go too deep in certain things, I just have to say the name. That's what's beautiful about rap. Like, I don't have to write a dissertation about Langston Hughes or this and that. I could just say his name and do it in a stylish way, and put things together in a puzzle, and people can interpret it or go deeper into it if they so choose.
Very cool, man. And like the last thing that I want to talk to you about is your newest track, which is The End of Their World, part 2. Pretty spectacular. I didn't watch the video. I think he shared, there's a video that it came with, right? Like, but I didn't watch the video because I heard it on Spotify. I have to say, like, this standout line for me, I wrote it down. I was actually running, and I was like, while I was running, I kind of like took a note of it, which is 2 lines: want to be rich, deny history, that's the grift. And then they steal our words and flip them, which is, and you were talking about Kwame Ture, And you were talking about how like they take movement language and use it against it. A lot going on in the end of their world, and I particularly like the end of their world because we like to know who there is and like who they are. I'll ask it in two parts. So what is the end?
Well, the end is the fall of the fall is capitalism. That would be the end. You know,
That'd be the end, right?
that would be that would be a happy beginning more than an end. You know what I mean? A new beginning. The end is
That was
like
going to be my follow-up, by the way. Like my
right,
follow-up was going to be what's the beginning, but
right.
yeah, like let's tie them both together. Why not?
Yeah, because it's like, look, this is not sustainable. Like it's chaos. Like as much as even myself was asleep, you know, during a lot of these times, even during my album Awakening, I think politically, not I wasn't aware. I knew what was going on, but I wasn't really so deep into it. I started really getting more into really studying deeper into the politics probably around 2016, around that time, you know, around the Trump era, to be honest. It woke up a lot of people. And it's always been, the world has always been chaotic. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't a time where everything was smooth and everything, but it really just seems like with COVID, it exposed so much, you know, like everything that was a problem became a bigger problem. And everything like the inequality of between the poor and the rich, it got worse. Now people are struggling with mental health issues because they're more isolated. We're seeing the planet get destroyed. So it's the end of a lot of things. This is not going to continue. There's going to be a shift, and whether we can make it a better place or get worse, it has to be up to us. You know, if it's not up to us, then we might as well just give up. And
Right.
we can't. We're not here to give up. We're breathing. We have a voice. We could take action. And it's for me to be like, look, this world is ending. Whatever La La Land, even if you were doing somewhat good, you know, I'm definitely not talking about the billionaire. They're doing good all the time. You know, even when they're doing bad, they're still doing way better than everybody else. But, you know, there's some people that they're making their little 90,000 a year. They're able to go to the stadium. They will go to the, no, I mean, not anymore, but go to their concerts or buy whatever they want, have the nice SUV and stuff. Like, you need to realize that you should wake up, because you know, the problems might come to you at some point too. I'm not just talking about the real poor. It's just like there's an issue here. Wake up. You know, it's like if you have somebody you know that died of COVID, or that has stuck with a tremendous hospital bill, anything like that, you're probably still paying student debt. So you got your $90,000, but you still can't even use that money because you owe hundreds of thousands of dollars to an Ivy League school or something. Like, there's problems here. And it's really to tell people like, look, something is ending. The world has shifted ever since last year, even more pronouncedly because of COVID. And yeah, just know that, you know, whatever you thought was the world, like get used to something new right now. And you could participate or you could still watch, but you're going to watch the world crumble from what you knew
Right.
what it was.
I'm just wondering if I like missed out on asking you anything because I feel like I'm more or less done. Maybe the kind of organizing work you do, because you're in like politics circles, actual politics circles a lot. I mean, you were on Michael Brooks' show, right? Like, talk a little bit about that friendship, maybe, and like talk a little bit about the actual political work you do.
I told you around 2016 is when I discovered the left community online. And
Mm.
I think it's probably, I probably seen my algorithm post some majority report videos, right? And just watched the video and I'm like, oh, I didn't know there was people like this around, because I didn't have any type of media that I could really relate to. Like now I know more because of that, you know, like I didn't even know Democracy Now! Was doing what it was doing at that point, you know? So it opened me up to that world. So I'll start listening to Sam Cedar, Michael Brooks, Jamie and all that. And me and Michael Brooks started reaching out to each other on Instagram, just like that, just little DMs. I'm like, I think I probably reached out to him like, yo, I really like what you're doing, you know, just more power to you. And he's like, yo, I love what you're doing too. You know, I really like your music. And I was like, all right, that's cool. Like he's heard about me. So we started following each other. And sometimes we would send each other little messages just randomly. You know, he'll ask me, like, he'll see a story where I'm doing a video shoot. He's like, I'd like to see one of your videos, like attend one day. And I'll be like, yeah, sure, let's stay in touch. And we lived in Brooklyn.
Mm.
So it got to a point where we're like, yo, one day we should just link up. And that's what happened. Like a few months later, we ended up having coffee somewhere and we just had a conversation, and it was just like having an old friend there. You know, it was our first real conversation, not through text. And it felt like we knew each other. We would talk about music, talk about politics, we talked about everything. And what struck me with him was that, you see, being in music, right? I met a lot of rappers that I loved, that I grew up. And when you meet people, sometimes they're different from what you expect, because you think you know them because you listen to their music and their voice, but you don't actually know somebody till you meet them. Like you just know like a piece of their art. You don't know the person. Well, Michael Brooks is just like, he was exactly like he portrayed himself, which I
Mm.
thought was interesting because a lot of people are not like that. And at the end of this meeting, we probably talked for like 3 hours. He was like, I want you to come on my show. And I was like, really? Because I didn't go there with that agenda. You know, I just went there to talk with him and everything. I'm like, yo, you think I could come on your show? You got to talk about real stuff. You know what I mean? He's like, look, I've been talking to you for like a few hours. You know, like of course you could come through, and you have good insights on a lot of things. You know about African stuff, and I talk about a lot of international stuff. I think also that drew him to that part too, because he was very international in his scope, more than like the Majority Report and everything. He had that thing. So he invited me. And I guess it introduced me to that whole media space, the left-wing media space, which I felt honored to be part of, you know what I mean? And because now I'm a regular on the Namiki show. You know, we got on This Is Revolution. I talk to people like Harvey K all the time, things like that. And I just feel blessed to have some people that see that the world could be improved, and see the world in the same way that I do. And it's not all about what we could do. It's about the collective. And when it comes to politics, before that, when I got to Brooklyn, I knew I wanted to do something else than just do music, you know. And I forgot exactly how, but I got some opportunities to be part of student artist teachers that would
Mm.
go to summer camps, and people would ask me to be a guest speaker for some kids, talk about hip hop, do little workshops. So I started doing things like that. And so I started working at middle schools in Brownsville, high schools in Brownsville, in the Bronx. I started going to prison. I started going to Rikers Island to do workshops of hip hop, to work with the youth, the inmates that were like youth. And so to me, I mean, it's not directly political, but to me, it was political because we actually show videos about like different things. We would to talk to kids about propaganda. We would show them videos of Dead Prez, of different rappers that had a different type of vision of things. So to me, I thought we were giving some alternative education that they were getting every day, and also we were helping them be creative. So I did a lot of that with an organization called Urban Art Beat, and
Mm.
it's I do a lot of like events. Like we did some events where we raised water for Flint when Flint was having problems. We was raising money for them. I go to Newark a lot. They do a lot of community work, and they always have shows and those type of artistic events. So mostly for me, it's through artistry. There's a lot of causes where people who have causes who ask me to speak or do different
Right.
things, and I show up and contribute the way that I can.
You read a lot of books also, I presume, right? Because you drop a bunch of names like in the lyrics. So can you like we'll close with this, I think. Can you like talk a little bit about like the books that you read, currently reading, and
Right.
what you would recommend?
Well, let me show you. I got a book back here that I'm reading.
Mm-hmm.
Currently halfway done through this one. Somebody gave me as a gift. It's called The Avengers of the New World, and
Wow.
it's a book about the Haitian Revolution. And so it talks about Toussaint Louverture, and the slavery in Haiti, how it happened and the history behind that. So it's very, very interesting book. I'm halfway through it. It's inspiring me a lot, actually. I'm also the book before that I was reading was the book from Harvey K, where he was it was just a compilation of his speeches. And he talks a lot about FDR. That's like his main thing. Thomas Paine and
Mm-hmm.
FDR. Actually, I have his Thomas Paine book, but I didn't start reading it yet. So that's something I want to get into. Also, Akhenaton, like he suggested I read. We're a lot into the Oriental philosophy and things like that. There's a book, oh, man, Musashi Miyamoto, I think, who was like a famous swordsman or samurai, and I'm reading a book about that. So it's like it's kind of eclectic what I like to read about, you know. But I'm definitely into like political type books, and I try. Oh, also I'm also reading from This is Revolution, Dr. Jared Ball's book, The Myth and Propaganda of the Black Buying Power.
Very
I'm
nice.
I started reading it after we did the interview together, and I'm almost done with it. I'm be done with it in 1 or 2 days. It's a really good book. Opened my eyes on a lot of things, and also made me think about hip hop, because a lot of that myth of Black power was promoted by certain hip hop artists and a lot of the commercialized hip hop. So you can see how things that mainstream music also helps the agenda of capitalists that make money, because the culture they promote is the culture that keeps the status quo going and keeps us thinking that this is the best way to be. And I, you know, I kind of want to shatter that stereotype as a rapper. That's why your first thought was like, you know, struggle rap, whatever the name is, it's different than the rap that you hear. That's why I called it reality rap, because the normal rap that you hear is just, it's just not reality, man. It's a certain reality, but it's so narrow, and you would believe that's what rap is about, but it's really not, you know.